Blockbuster wasn't killed by streaming. By the time the world was binge-watching on their laptops, Blockbuster was already a ghost. A relic of a bygone era. The common story is that technology made it obsolete. But that's not the whole truth. The company wasn't defeated by a futuristic algorithm or super-fast internet. It was defeated by something much simpler. Something you could hold in your hand. A simple red envelope. And the brilliant, hidden system behind it. In the year 2004, Blockbuster was an undisputed titan. An $8.5 billion empire with over 9,000 stores worldwide. It was more than a company. It was a cultural institution. A mandatory stop for any weekend. At the same time, Netflix was a tiny, niche service. They had no stores. No physical presence. Their entire business relied on the postal service. To the executives at Blockbuster, they were an annoying fly, not a lethal threat. Blockbuster even had the chance to buy them for just $50 million and famously laughed them out of the room. We all know how that story ended. Today, Blockbuster is a single, lonely store in Bend, Oregon. Netflix is a global media superpower worth hundreds of billions. So how did this happen? How did a small startup, mailing plastic discs in envelopes, manage to dismantle a global empire? The answer isn't just about the internet. It's about a radical business model that attacked Blockbuster's greatest strengths and turned them into fatal weaknesses. This is the story of how a red envelope became a weapon of mass disruption. To understand how Netflix won, we need to dissect the three strategic pillars that Blockbuster completely ignored. First, let's talk about Blockbuster's most profitable and most hated feature, the late fee. In the year 2000, Blockbuster generated over $800 million in revenue just from late fees. This accounted for roughly 16% of their total income. From a purely financial perspective, late fees were a massive success. But from a customer relationship perspective, they were a disaster. Think about the experience. You'd rent a movie, forget about it for a day or two, and suddenly your $5 rental cost you $10. The feeling was one of punishment. Every late fee created a negative interaction with the brand. It felt unfair. Predatory. It was a constant source of friction between the company and its customers. Netflix saw this friction not as a revenue stream, but as a strategic weakness. Their solution was revolutionary in its simplicity, a subscription model with no late fees. Ever. For a flat monthly fee, customers could keep a DVD for as long as they wanted. A day. A week. A month. It didn't matter. There was no penalty. This wasn't just a marketing gimmick, it was a fundamental reinvention of the customer relationship. It shifted the dynamic from a punitive, transactional one to a service-oriented, friendly one. Netflix wasn't there to penalize you for being human. It was there to provide a service. This single decision built a foundation of customer goodwill and loyalty that Blockbuster, with its entire business model dependent on penalty charges, could never replicate. Customers weren't just signing up for movies, they were signing up for peace of mind. Now, let's look at Blockbuster's biggest asset, its stores. Those 9,000 physical locations were monuments to their market dominance. They were on every corner in every major city. This massive retail footprint seemed like an unbeatable advantage. In reality, it was a concrete anchor dragging the company to the bottom of the ocean. Each store represented enormous fixed costs. Rent, utilities, employee salaries, and most importantly, inventory. Every Blockbuster store had to be stocked with hundreds of copies of the latest Hollywood blockbuster. But demand was unpredictable. The store on one side of town might be completely out of a new release, while the store on the other side had copies sitting on the shelf. This model was incredibly inefficient. They were paying to store, manage, and staff thousands of mini warehouses all over the world. Netflix flipped this model on its head. Instead of 9,000 retail stores, Netflix operated with a few dozen, highly efficient, centralized distribution centers. These were not retail locations. They were anonymous warehouses located near major postal hubs. This was a classic asset-light strategy. Their overhead was a tiny fraction of Blockbuster's. One single warehouse could serve millions of customers across an entire region. They didn't need customer-facing staff. They didn't need expensive retail real estate. More importantly, their inventory was national, not local. If you lived in a small town and wanted to watch an obscure foreign film, your local Blockbuster was unlikely to have it. But Netflix's national inventory meant they could stock a vast library of titles, far beyond what any single store could manage. This was the famous long tail in action. They could serve niche tastes profitably, while Blockbuster was forced to focus only on the hits. Blockbuster's greatest asset, its physical presence, had become its greatest liability. This leads us to the final, and most brilliant, piece of the puzzle. The element that tied everything together and turned Netflix from a clever idea into a logistical powerhouse. That element was the queue. On the surface, the queue was just a simple wish list. A way for users to line up the movies they wanted to watch next. But underneath, it was a sophisticated demand prediction engine. And it was Netflix's secret weapon. Blockbuster had no real way of knowing what you wanted to watch next week. They could only react to current demand. They had to guess how many copies of a new movie to order for each of their 9,000 stores. If they guessed wrong, they either had angry customers or wasted inventory. Netflix, on the other hand, had perfect visibility into the future. By asking millions of users to list the next 10, 20, or 50 movies they wanted to see, Netflix collected a treasure trove of data. They knew, with incredible accuracy, exactly how many copies of any given DVD they would need. They could optimize their purchasing down to the last unit. But the queue did something even more powerful. It allowed Netflix to manage scarcity. When a hot new release came out, demand would always outstrip supply. At Blockbuster, this meant an empty shelf and a frustrated customer. At Netflix, the system was different. If your number one choice wasn't available, the algorithm simply moved to your number two choice, or number three. An older, less popular movie from their back catalog would be sent out automatically. The customer was still happy because they received a movie they explicitly said they wanted to see. And Netflix was even happier. They were able to satisfy their customer by sending them a cheaper, older DVD that they already owned, instead of having to buy another expensive copy of a new release. The queue, combined with their recommendation algorithm, allowed Netflix to shape demand, gently guiding users towards the most profitable and readily available parts of their library. It was a system that maximized both customer satisfaction and operational efficiency at the same time. And this is the secret. This is what the executives at Blockbuster never understood. They weren't competing against a DVD rental company. They were competing against a sophisticated logistics and data corporation that happened to rent DVDs. The three pillars, no late fees, a centralized asset-light model, and the data harvesting queue, were not independent features. They were a single, interconnected, and symbiotic system. The subscription model with no late fees built customer trust and loyalty. The asset-light distribution network slashed overhead and enabled a massive library. And the queue was the brain that made it all work. It converted customer desire into hard, predictable data. This data allowed Netflix to manage a national inventory with surgical precision, keeping costs low and customers happy. Blockbuster saw the product, a plastic disc in a case. They built their entire $8 billion empire around getting that one product into a customer's hands for a weekend. Netflix saw the system. They focused on the entire process, the desire, the selection, the delivery, the return, and the data that connected it all. While Blockbuster was busy managing shelves, Netflix was managing demand. They weren't just playing the game better, they were playing an entirely different game. And if you're having your own aha moment right now about how a simple list could be a strategic weapon, show your support by hitting the like button and subscribing. It helps us keep unlocking these strategies. The brilliance of the Netflix model was that it didn't just offer a better product. It systematically dismantled every core component of its competitor's business. It identified the biggest points of customer friction, the late fees and limited selection, and eliminated them. It recognized that Blockbuster's biggest asset, its stores, was also its heaviest anchor, and it built a model with almost none of that weight. The ultimate lesson here is about asymmetric competition. Netflix didn't try to build more stores or get better real estate. They refused to compete on Blockbuster's terms. Instead, they changed the rules of the game entirely. They created a business model that their competitor was structurally incapable of fighting. For Blockbuster to get rid of late fees would have meant sacrificing 16% of its revenue overnight. For them to close their stores would have meant destroying the company. They were trapped by their own success. True disruption isn't always about a revolutionary new technology. Often, it's about a revolutionary new business model. It's about looking at an industry leader's greatest strengths and finding a way to turn them into their most profound weaknesses. If you learn something new, hit the like button and subscribe for more strategy breakdowns. And let us know in the comments, what company's strategy should we unlock next?